Hi guys, my name is Miranda Hunley, and if you like true crime, I think you are in the right place because that's what we talk about here. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So I'm going to do another My Hometown Horrors video, and this one has been on my list since about April. My uncle asked me if I ever heard of George Skates. I told him no. He said, you should look into him. I knew him. And so as I'm reading on about it, I asked my dad, and my dad's like, oh yeah, he's from Marion. So of course, naturally piqued my interest, kept digging into Google, and ended up almost horrified about this man's life. So let me tell you that. In October 1979, Arthur Smith was murdered in his department store that he managed. And it took about 3 years until the police turned their eyes to George Skates. George Skates was described as pretty quiet. He wasn't really a people person, but he wasn't known to hurt or harm anybody. It just kind of seemed like he was one of those people with like his walls up. So it was really shocking when he was blamed for the murder of Arthur Smith at Rink's department store. So this is 1982, and there's no physical evidence linking George Skates to this murder. Really, all what the police had on him was one inmate who had a lengthy history of violent crimes. Over 30 to be exact. Over 30 violent crimes that they were convicted of. And this person is like, hey, I don't want a murder charge. I think I know who did it. And then he said George Skates' name. And unfortunately, George was convicted for this murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. And I do need to say, in reality, there was quite a bit of evidence linking the murder to the guy who said it was George Skates. But there was no evidence for George Skates. And unfortunately, this is kind of like a trend in the justice system. So that's all I have for you guys. Thank you. I'm kidding. No, that is just the beginning. Like, that's really unfortunate for George. But it gets worse, and I'm going to tell you about his time in prison. Easter Sunday, 1993, the inmates had enough at this Lucasville prison. And it was just overcrowded, and they were being disrespected. They weren't treated like humans. So once this new warden comes in and he's saying, hey, we all need to do TB tests, which on one hand I understand because TB in prison is very serious and it spreads like wildfire. But on the other hand, the Muslims are saying this is against our religion. We don't want to do this test. And instead of compromising, the warden was like, just force it on them. So the Muslim gang and another gang in the prison come together and they're like, we're done. The warden is not listening to us. They don't care about our concerns. They're not treating us like we're human beings. So they plan to get all the bats out. Like, it was like one of the inmates was running like the inventory for the gym and just was like, take all the bats basically. The first thing they do is just beat a couple of the guards, put them in inmate clothing, and take them to the sanctuary, which I thought was really weird. So there was a part of the prison in this room, they were trained if something bad were to happen, go into this room, and the walls were supposed to be lined with rebar. There was not rebar in this wall, and the inmates were able to actually get in there really easily, and they put the guards in there and was just kind of like, hey, you're our hostages now. And they did that to 8 different guards. The next thing they did was kill 9 inmates that they said were the snitches, and they put them on the yard for the media, for the warden, for the state highway patrol in the world basically to see. And that's just kind of the gist of how it all began. It actually is like quite deeper, but I'm kind of focusing more on George Skates' part in this riot. And if you are more interested in like the whole picture of the riot, there is a show on Netflix called Captive, and the very first episode is the Lucasville riot, but the person portraying George Skates is an actor. There's some of the real people, and then the George Skates is just an actor. After 2 days of the riot, the water and the electricity gets shut off, and George is just like, hey, this is not going anywhere. Like, we are all going to end up either killing each other, or they're going to bum rush us and come kill us. Like, why are we doing this? We need to communicate. And so there were 5 main leaders of this riot, George Skates being one of them as the negotiator, and then another guy kind of comes in as the negotiator. We'll get to that. But they get together and they write a list of 21 demands. So George makes contact with the prison officials and he says, I want the media to talk to me. And they're like, oh, hell no. Like, no, because, you know, the media gets their side. Like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? These people are so crazy. But George wants to say, like, they are treating us like caged animals in here. This is not about race. This is not about gangs versus gangs. This is the inmates having enough of the mistreatment, the overcrowding, the lack of hygiene products.
This is Lieutenant Lewis. I'm the Assistant District 6 Commander talking to you now. If anything happens to either one of us, something will probably happen to those hostages. I want you people to understand this ain't no fucking joke, boys. It got 8 lives in there that we're all concerned about. Now, let's get something rolling here. What do you want to do? You want to talk to one of our negotiators? And we want the news media. Skate, call 245. 45? Yeah. 245. They will talk to you. All right, I hope I got your word on that.
Okay, hang on just a minute. He's walking away.
Inmate negotiator.
Hi, this is Dave. Who's this?
Inmate negotiator. Hold for a minute. Let me get George for you, all right?
I wish you would, yeah.
Okay, sir.
Well, what can we do for you, George?
Well, we can start out with the lights. We can start out with the water. We can start out with news media and delivering you to the hostages. How's that?
I can't guarantee you that the news media will even talk to you.
Oh, cut it out. Let's knock off the bullshit. What do you say? Give me Channel 10 News. Channel 10 News.
And for that, you would give me 2 hostages? Is that what you're telling me? George, let me discuss it with my boss.
How long am I going to have to sit around here and hold my nuts till you give me a decision on that?
As soon as I can get the information. Where will you be?
Well, I'll be here on Elk Quarter. You can bet on that.
Well, I expect you're right about that.
So on day 5 of the riot, after trying to say, hey, I want to talk to the media for 3 days, they make a sign and it says, if you don't let us talk to the media in 3.5 hours, we are going to kill one of our hostages. Remember, there's 8 guards in there.
One of our demands previously was to talk to the news media. We were willing to give you 2 hostages. I don't see why you won't let us meet with these news people.
We can't trust the media.
You can't trust the media. Why? Because they're going to broadcast this thing exactly the way it is.
One of the prison officials go to the media and they're like, no, they're fibbing. They've done this before. Like, did you guys not see the 9 inmates that they killed? Like those snitches that they just laid on the yard? You really don't think that they're going to kill one of the guards? The inmates are like, what is she talking about? Like, I think that kind of scared the inmates a little bit because they're like, they really are underestimating what's going on. They're really downplaying everything that's going on. Nobody can say who, but it was very spontaneous. One of the inmates just starts strangling Robert, and I'm not going to even attempt to say the last name. And his body was taken to the yard. And this shocked everyone because Robert was actually one of the correctional officers that the inmates really liked and really respected. He respected them and he didn't really bother anyone. The community also really loved him. I think that is why they chose to strangle him, because he was extremely well loved, and that was going to get the attention of everyone, because if they can do that to Robert, what else can they do? My condolences go out to Robert's family, even 30 years later.
I know in my heart that tonight's the night. I know that. I know that if we don't go out there and do something, as you got it set up, that you're blowing and you're coming in here, and I know that. We know that your end result is to kill as many of us as you can. We know that. Did you lose control? I never had control. I'm just a negotiator. I'm just one man. George, you can get me one hostage and you. I'll sit down face to face on live radio. You owe me that much. Can I come out there and talk to you on live radio? Just me? And one hostage with you. I can't do that. Yes, you can, George. The stop to this in a peaceful, orderly manner. I hope nobody else hurt.
After the murder of Robert, the inmates were very well prepared for, like, everybody to just bum rush the prison and just kind of, like, shoot everyone. So they made a maze out of the bunkers. I thought that was kind of creative. So if they came in at any doorway, there was bunk beds that they would have to, like, maneuver around. There was also a Vietnam vet in that prison who made bombs, and they kind of had these booby traps everywhere around the prison. Eventually, the prison officials were like, okay, George, you want to talk to the media? We'll give you radio time.
My brothers, if you can hear me on that radio, please holler at me. We hope there is no more violence. We hope there are no more unnecessary murders. Okay, from the onset of this, we have tried desperately to get in contact with the news media. We have beat our brains out. We have been stopped by this administration. They think they can confine this incident within the walls of this prison, like no part of the world can hear this. Okay, I'm very limited in time. I'm sorry. I mean, the list of the bands and all like that is by no means short. I could rattle on forever. Now, we are releasing one down, Ray Clark Jr. here on the other side of this fence.
So he takes one of the hostages and lets them go. This correctional officer was only about 23 at the time. He was very young. So they let him go because they did get their media time. But George was very scattered in that radio broadcast. And I think that was kind of like a wake-up call for him that he needs some rest. He needs some sleep. Like, he needs some food. So he kind of passes off the negotiation title to another inmate after this. On day 6, another hostage gets released because he converted to Islam, and everyone turns their back on this hostage, which I think is crazy, because if I went 6 days without food, water, and I thought I was gonna die, like my buddy right beside me just got strangled to death, and they're like, you have to convert to Islam to survive, I would say okay. But people in the town were calling him a traitor and that he became one of them. Like, I think a lot of us would do the same. On day 9, they get Nikki Swartz as a lawyer, and Nikki actually goes into the prison riot and looks at the list of the 21 demands, tells them what's real, what's not, and what they can do. And by day 11 of this riot, the riot has ended. Really, all thanks to Nikki Swartz. Like, Nikki Swartz was a great negotiator. Unfortunately, George Skatzes got the death penalty for being a negotiator for this prison riot. And I think that is completely unfair, because he was really trying to say, okay, let's have some type of method to this madness, and let's talk to them, and hey, let's get it out to the media so people know why we are doing this. And if it really wasn't for him taking on that initiative, I think more people would have died. But I'm not justifying any of the prison riot, because 10 people died. And those 10 people didn't deserve to die. Especially, okay, I know like snitches get stitches and all that stuff, but 30 people from that riot snitched and gave names out to who started it, who planned it, who was doing this, who was doing that. So they didn't get the death penalty that George and the other 4 leaders of the prison riot got. So, like, you guys killed snitches, but then you became the snitches. I don't know. I don't understand it. If there were to be another prison riot, nobody's going to want to take the initiative to be that communication between the guards, the media, and the inmates. And it's just going to be all hectic because they're going to be like, oh no, George Skates, all he did was just talk to the police during the riot and he got the death penalty. Skates is still alive and he is on death row currently with 123 other death row inmates at the Chillicothe, Ohio prison.